Hello and welcome to the Great Marketing Turnaround. If you see my slide, the Great Marketing Turnaround, and that's what you registered for, then you are in the right place. As we get started here, I'm going to wait a little bit to allow a few more people to join us. As we advertised or sent you a link in the email, there are a few hands-on activities. So if you are joining us and you have yet to grab those activities, the link to the page where you can find them is up on your screen. And I think we can also put that in chat, maybe to make it easier for people. And so that you can download, there are 2 activities. So if you hit that link, you'll find the session 1 activities called Customer Persona and Position Map. So as we're waiting, if you haven't had a chance, download those. I believe it's easier for people to work with these as you print them and do it by hand, but you can also open them with Adobe. And if you have the ability to look at more than one thing on your screens, they can be edited in Adobe Acrobat. So we'll take another few seconds here. This session, as I said, because it's hands-on, it's kind of not one of those things where you're kind of going to be multitasking. So I'm asking people really think about devoting this time to your business. That will help you get the most out of our time together. And your time is really valuable. I get it. But this is going to deliver hopefully dividends as you invest some time with your marketing planning. So I think while we're waiting, I think we'll wait a few more minutes, but let's just start with a question in chat. If you can give me a little bit of an idea, since we don't have the ability to network and talk back and forth, if we'll use chat, tell me about what your business specializes in. So if you're just in, a phrase or a couple words, just tell me what it is that your business specializes in. You can answer in our chat to give us some familiarity of who's joining us today. Thank you, Amber. It looks like she's got a business that specializes in assembly for things like swing sets and sheds and other appliances repairs. So it's a service business with some targeted areas. Knowing your business specialty is really critical for developing a successful marketing program. So that's why we start out kind of just getting to know one another about what it is that we consider our specialties, and we'll talk more about that through the program. Another one, math, reading, learning centers, which seems to me to be an exciting business right now, Chelsea, because I know that education is receiving a lot of emphasis because of COVID. So that's a great one. Maddie, dealer, wholesale, what areas do you specialize in terms of your wholesale business? Used car, great. So we've got a good variety here, a lot of service industry. So this will be a great one for you guys. Let's get started here also with a poll. It's really important for me to kind of understand where you are at in terms of your marketing planning. So Donna, thank you. It's the poll you should see on your screen says, do you have a marketing plan? And if you could just give me a quick answer on that. Nancy, I see coaching, another great service industry, particularly healthcare. That's a great niche, and we'll talk about that. So do you have a documented marketing plan? Just a quick yes, no, sort of. I don't even know what a marketing plan is. All right. I think everybody's had a little bit of time to mark in their answers. Do we have enough back, Donna, on the response for the poll?
We have about 5 that are still outstanding.
All right, come on, guys.
Give it about 3 more seconds.
You can be honest about this one. Nobody's gonna have any idea who says what. So we just want to kind of get an idea of where you're at in developing your marketing plan. So just give me a yes, no, sort of. Awesome. So really great response that a lot of you have developed a marketing plan, a little over a third of you. Some of you have not, and some of you are like, marketing plan, what is that? Or I kind of sort of have one. Wherever you're at, today's goal is we're really going to start that process from the customer identification step back up. And then in the following Great Marketing Turnaround webinars, we talk about how all of this fits together to make your marketing efforts stronger. So the studies that I've seen show that documenting your plan, actually going through some pen and paper work on this, it makes our business marketers 3 times as effective in their marketing planning. So that's why we implore people to work with us and to get your own team together to work on a marketing plan. So today's topics, first of all, is going to be to look at your customer segment. So we're going to talk about the needs, habits, the ways of thinking, and we're going to go over what it takes to really fully define your customer segments. It's a great starting point, and it's really the area that you are the expert. So everybody here, believe it or not, I believe you're all experts. Even though I've never met you, I can know that you're an expert because you're an expert in what your own business is. And you all have the ability to really up your marketing game if you'll give yourself the time, if you'll give yourself a chance to look at your marketing in depth and to bring a new perspective to it. And the perspective that matters the most is your customers. So we're going to learn about our customers. We're also going to do some work on what I call positioning maps. They're also called perceptual maps. And we are going to see about how that can really help you with making your business different than some of your competitors. And then we can take this information and start working on the action plan by developing our unique selling proposition and really work towards the next programs, which are more about the messaging and the actual tactics. So at the very least, these next few hours, you have time to focus in on your business marketing and learn about these customer-centric approaches so that you can upgrade or start to document your marketing for more success. But a little bit before we start about the SBDC, many of you know all of this, so I'll try and run through it a little bit quickly for those of you who've never had a lot of interaction with the small business development centers. Maricopa SBDC is part of the Grand America's Network, but here in Maricopa, we have actually, I think it's a little over 17 counselors. The slide might be dated. We have 10 different centers throughout Arizona that serve small businesses throughout the state. And our main areas that we offer are counseling, training, and some additional resources. So let me talk a little bit about the counseling. There's no charge for our counseling services. That's part of our the benefit of working with Maricopa Community Colleges, the SBA funding we receive, and the Arizona Commerce Authority. So businesses receive our counseling services in some of these technical areas, including what we've been heavily into lately, the COVID relief and other disaster loan assistance. We're always working with our clients on lender readiness and helping them prepare loan packages and following that process through. We do financial review, we do marketing assessment. We have expertise in buying and selling a business or exit strategies. We have a manufacturing expert. We have several technology and technology commercialization and startup and advancement experts. We have import expert and contracting, government contracting. So our team is very diverse. We have a lot of subspecialty areas, and we're really proud of how they work together as a team. If you don't work currently with an SBDC counselor, at the end of today's session, we'll discuss how you can request counseling services for that low cost or no fee counseling service. So some of the other resources that our counselors work or use when they're working with clients are on the screen now. We'll talk a lot about Growth Wheel. Growth Wheel has some tools that help walk our businesses through different decisions that they need to make, weighing different topics so that they can make a really well-informed decision. Life Plan is a tool that we use with businesses who are looking to develop their full business plan and document that and share that. We also have access to something called Profit Sense, which gives us industry data. It's sort of our financial benchmarking information. For additional market research, we have the SBDC Net and IBIS World, which gives us comprehensive business industry reports. So your counselors have some things to give you information that you might not necessarily have direct access to. Really quickly, as a presenter, I just want to share that I am a business analyst here at the SBDC, but I bring 35 years experience in doing a variety of marketing turnarounds, lots of different industry markets, including nonprofit. As an entrepreneur, I also get the need that you have to create profitable customers and to create programs fast and cost effectively. I have taught marketing at different levels, the college level, as well as high school and programs like the SBDC. I'm versed in a variety of tactics, which we won't get into, but my expertise is really in a strategic approach to marketing, that customer-centric marketing that we talked about. I'd also like to introduce Donna McCown and Esmeralda Estrada, who are here on the call with me today. Donna is co-facilitating this webinar, so she's helping me handle your interactions. These two ladies are really great contributors to our team, and they handle a lot of the hands-on marketing efforts for the center itself. So thank you guys for helping me out. All righty, let's get going here. So I'm going to start out, guys, with a quiz. Don't really freak out. It's not hard. In fact, it's going to only take about 10 seconds to do a very, very simple task. So really get ready. It's going to be quick. All you have to do is write down or even just remember your answer. Just 10 seconds. Are you ready? Here we go. All you need to do is count the number of times that the letter F appears in this sentence. Got it? All right, Donna, give him an opportunity to tell us how many F's you see in that sentence. What did you count? Share with us what your response is.
Okay, I'm going to give you guys about 10 more seconds. We need about 6 more people to vote.
They're like, I didn't even see the slide that was up there, so you're gonna have to make a guess, but let's see. Okay, so we have mostly 3s and 4s. Somebody saw 6. Okay. Well, all right, let's just close that. Let's try this again. I'm gonna give you a second chance. We're gonna do the same exact thing. So count the F's, same process, 10 seconds, ready, go. All right, let's try again. How many did you see this time?
Well, now people aren't even, not everybody's even voting as the last time because they're afraid they're getting it wrong.
Told you, I have no idea who's who, so.
Oh, no, here we go. Here we go.
Yeah,
I think they're really thinking
they're
about
overthinking it. They took their screenshot.
Right.
They took their screenshots. They're looking at it hard. Yeah, no cheating on this though. Just tell us what you think.
Yep. Okay.
So we got a few more 5s. Some of the 3s and 4s moved up to 5s. Oh, and 2 more people got 6. All right. Good job, guys. Very good job. So most people usually count 3 or 4. Here's the actual count. This isn't really about your proofreading, nor does it say anything about your IQ. There's no real big deal. It's something entirely different. So let me know what I see happens from time to time is that most people see more F's than they did the first time. Why do you think that is? You get more focused. If you count the actual F's on here, when I've highlighted them in red, there are 6 of them. And I think we can apply this activity to looking for customers, which is why I started off hoping to get your attention. But I really want to emphasize that the more tuned in to what we are looking for, the better we're going to find what it is we are looking for. So it's really about reframing yourself as you're understanding and looking for your customers, and really trying to, customers are just like these apps. They're out there. They're waiting to be found, but we might be overlooking some because we really haven't taken the time to define what it is we're looking for. And I presume you want more customers. So this session is about, what are we looking for? How do we recognize our best customer prospects? Yeah, whether they look similar to some of your other customers, because these F's look exactly alike, but actually this soft F and of is one of the ones that gets missed in this exercise. Or maybe your customers are a little bit more hidden. They look a little bit different, like this capital F, which is another one that gets missed. So whether you caught the 6 F's the first time, good job, I noticed somebody did that, or whether it took a couple more times, the message is really the same. The analogy is the same, is that we want to be able to tune in really explicitly so that we can find more of those F's, find more of those customers. So before we start that, I want to tell you that I believe that marketing and customer creation is really a little bit of art and a little bit of science. And what I share today kind of includes both. But the secret formula that we're going to talk about throughout all 3 sessions has to do with sending the right message about our right product and service to that right audience, which is ultimately what we're going to talk about today, and with the right timing. And that kind of is going to be a constant formula that we're going to come back to throughout these 3 sessions if you stay with us in the Great Marketing Turnaround. So you can, you will be using some tools that I talk about. We're just going to whet our appetite with them. We won't have enough time in the session to really go extensively in them, but you can use these tools to hone your customer portfolio and understand your audience better, and do some of these activities and continue on through the sessions with or without an SBDC counselor working with you. So one of the tools that I mentioned earlier is Growth Wheel, and we are going to do an activity from Growth Wheel today. Growth Wheel has a variety of focus areas that it hones in to help move clients' businesses forward. And I've highlighted some of those focus areas on the screen. Today, we're going to look at customer portfolio and the market position. So the right audience, and then the market position is about how to stand apart from your competition. So Growth Wheel has processes in a lot of these other areas, but we're only going to be looking at these 2 areas today. But I wanted to introduce the whole idea that even just within this quadrant of the business concept, there are a lot of different activities that you can hone in on if you're struggling, for instance, with your product design itself, or how your revenue model is translating. There are some other tools that we won't be going over today that you could work with your counselor. So to go through again, because some people are like, target market sounds very basic, but there are a lot of benefits of going through your target market, no matter how mature your business is, that will help you increase the odds in your favor, as I said, in making your marketing 3 times more successful at getting that right message to the right audience. So one of the things that we want to do is to really identify, and if possible, segment our customers into those groups that seek similar benefits, because then we can message them more adequately. And what we want each defined target market segment to be are these 4 qualities. We want them to be easily identifiable. We want them to be as easily reachable as we can. It's better if they're substantial. The more there are, it's a numbers game. And then we also want this market not to disappear, diminish. We want it to be stable and preferably even growing. So as you start to think about the ways that I'm going to ask you to define your target market, you may want to come back and ask yourself the questions, is this really an identifiable target market? We'll talk heavily about that. And how am I going to reach them? Is it substantial enough to make the income and the sales that I need? So Who's your target market? Well, let's talk first about the fact that everybody is not your target market. So it's definitely likely that your target market includes different segments, and your strategy might even need to be segmented per market. And we'll start down that path a little bit in a few minutes. But I really, as we go forward, want you to continue to ask not just who is your customer, but who is not your customer. And people who aren't going to value what you do are not your customers. If you put your energy and your focus on those that are likely to value your work and what you do, you're going to be more successful. It's pretty simple. It's very, very easy to say that, but it's a little bit more challenging to do. And market segmentation is what we do to clarify each of those given segments and try and get them into smaller, more easily communicatable groups. So we'll use some different methods to identify these customers based on their similarities in wants and needs. So I often bring up kind of a bizarre example. If you might consider a product that people are probably familiar with, Red Bull, or what I used to talk about is it's what I considered a little bit of its predecessor was the soda product called Jolt. I don't know, I'm dating myself. How many of you would remember Jolt Cola? And that if you don't, the slogan, to give you a hint, their slogan was all the sugar and twice the caffeine. So it really did set itself apart from other sodas in its heyday. And they really, they gave an example of how important it was to understand who is not their customer. So they knew that anybody who needed to be in bed by 8 o'clock, probably not their customer. And a person who's really intent on watching their calories or counting that they couldn't afford the sugar, not their customer. And yet, you know, Red Bull and Jolt know that there is an ideal audience for a quadruple shot enhanced caffeine energy drink for sure. And Jolt and Red Bull and others in their category are really hyper focused in on that. And before you think this is like so obvious again, let me remind you of those F's and how many you could be missing. If you saw 3, if you're only getting 3 and there's really twice that out there, trying to really get into finding and defining who that target market is, segmenting it about all of those qualities that will let you speak to them in a more successful way. Put in a different way, if you haven't read it yet, I recommend the book Duct Tape Marketing by John Jones. It recommends that as you go through this, you start your marketing by profiling what they call your ideal customer. And that's one of the activities that we're going to do today, because as we create what's called a customer persona, it allows us to really individualize and craft better marketing strategies. So we define a persona with their age, their income level, their likes, their dislikes, maybe their favorite movies, their songs, and we personalize that. We find out who this person is, what drives her, or what does he really want from you. We want to know that person, where they live and with whom, and we want our entire teams to really know this person, understand this person. And so the process is really giving us some definition. And so we're going to sample that in a minute. We're going to try and use that to get to know and recognize our F's, our customers very well, so that we don't miss those opportunities. All right, so I mentioned growth wheel.
Heidi, I'm sorry, can I interrupt really quickly? We did have a question about the book that you had mentioned, and also if you could please put your questions in the Q&A box, because they might get lost in the chat, and that way Heidi can see them as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the name of the book is Duct Tape Marketing. Okay. Yeah, we'll build up on those questions. I do a lot of fast talking, so keep your questions or put them out there in the Q&A, and Donna will make sure that we get to all of them. So we're starting with defining the target market, and this graphic that is up here is actually from Growth Wheel, but these 4 qualities in terms of market definition are pretty standard. I will say that some different areas define them in a little bit different ways, but once you know these 4 categories, and if you can use them, each of these groups has a whole range of further criteria. So when we talk about demographics, we're talking about things like age and income and gender and life stage. In age, you don't necessarily have to get down to a specific age. When we do a persona, we're kind of naming a specific age, but a lot of times people will make cut points in terms of age and use the market definitions or clusters that you've probably heard of: baby boom generation, Generation X, millennials. And now I'm hearing that there's the Zoom generation as the latest and greatest. So they're somewhat arbitrary in terms of the cutoff points. They're not exact science and they're evolving, but I think it's valid to use them because even this information is going to help you define some important things to reach your customers, such as their media consumption or the size of the market. So having something like age range and of course income is very important as well. So all of these demographics are a really good starting point. And when we talk about that, we'll notice that these are things that you really can totally measure. Okay, these are some things that you can really measure specifically to define your target market. And as we talked in the very beginning, some of you, some of the service industries sounded like you could have business to business or businesses or organizations as part of your target markets. All of these characteristics for these 4 categories, they would be different a little bit than the consumer market, but they still apply. So in fact, demographic targeting is really, that data is almost more available for businesses. So if you have businesses, your customers, you can use business size, and it can be defined by number of employees, or it can be defined by some of the sales numbers that are available. It can be defined by the products that are made. When we get into some of the other criteria, I even use things like software platform compatibility. If your product has anything to do with technology, there are a lot of different things that you can do in these categories for a B2B. So even though we're talking a lot about consumer-based marketing, this still apply. So the second area is geographic, and geographic is typically where your customer lives or maybe works, but it often can be described in areas such as where, like urban versus suburban or rural. It could be even designed, it's not on this slide, but it could be even climate, like living in a cold climate versus a warmer climate could be an area that's a geographic definition. You could have different segments based on, these are my local segments, I market to them in a different way than I do say my online segments, which are global. So you could have your segmentation be entirely about geographic because you might have a different distribution channel based on the geography of your customer. So geographic is the second. Psychographics, the psychology as it's stated here, what I like to call is psychographics, because as much as we can make them measurable like the demographics, that would be great. Not all of them are. But I use an acronym in trying to remember this one, and it's VALS, which stands for values, attitudes, lifestyle. So it's VALS. What are your VALS? What are your values, attitudes, and lifestyle? And so we're thinking of the bigger total picture of your customer and thinking about ways to communicate with them that are based on their lifestyle and tapping into their work or recreation or family. And so we'll define things by psychographic. Just an example of that could be, you know, green marketing, doing some marketing that's definitely somehow eco-friendly or tied to that. Fashion is another area of psychographic marketing. So this is one thing that I've really seen bump up in importance during this period of COVID. There's been so much change to people's lifestyle. The way that COVID has affected us has really changed our lifestyles, even our attitudes, and ultimately our behaviors. And so if we've got a really static way of thinking of our customer and we haven't updated that during this whole pandemic, this could be a really good time to take out your magnifying glass and look a little deeper at that target market, because things could have shifted a little bit in the past year. Let me do an example. Let's say you have a product that targets people whose values and lifestyles include self-care as a priority. And let's say that your products were distributed mainly through spas pre-COVID, because it really matched your end users' values, it matched their lifestyle, you knew where to get them, and it was the perfect distribution. But guess what happened? COVID came. There was attitudes about safety, spas were shut down, people changed their behavior. They decided that, well, I still have the value of self-care and wellness, but my buying behavior, nope, I'm not going to get a facial. I'm going to do a home facial. So their behavior, their buying behavior changed in how they were purchasing products. Their attitude about self-care still, came a priority. So you will ask yourself these questions about what might have changed in these 4 areas as you go through it. And it could be that buyer behavior is one of the areas, and psychographics as well. They're tricky because it's getting into the head of your customer, but they're really important as you go through and defining your target market. So as you look at the buyer behavior, that's the timing, the criteria, and we'll spend some time on that when we get into positioning, their price sensitivity. These are all important factors, convenience, quality. You will note that the 3 prior market definitions influence buyer behavior. So their values, attitudes, their psychographics, even their demographics, their income levels, they're all going to influence their buyer behavior. All right, so we are going to, based on our time here, instead of like trying to do a bunch of segmentation, we're going to do a representative exercise that relates to segmenting. And it's a little bit what I talked about when I mentioned duct tape marketing. And this is called creating a customer persona. So this is the first download. You have to have access to that download, that decision sheet called customer persona. I have an example on the screen right now. Thank you, Donna, also put the link in there. And if you don't have it, no worries. You can always just grab a blank sheet of paper and do some of this on a blank sheet of paper. So this customer persona is going to help you define your ideal customer for these later steps in your marketing plan. So a segment is, like I said, those smaller groups of customers that have similar target market definitions and qualities. A persona is a representation of maybe that one of those segments. So you might have multiple customer personas if you have multiple market segments. So the person that does the handyman installation might have a segment, as she mentioned, or I can't remember, some products that had to do with like setting up swing sets in the backyard. That's a very different persona than maybe helping an elderly person install technology or something of that nature. So there could be multiple segments with multiple needs, and we're just going to work on one for today, our customer persona. So at this time, we're going to use that growth wheel to create that customer persona. And we're going to make, it's just what I like to call a composite sketch of a typical person. So we're going to try and figure out, if you can, select one segment that you want to work about. Hopefully you're thinking about that now, what your best segment is. And we're going to create that composite. Maybe you can actually think of several of your best customers and try and put them together into this composite sketch of those real customers. So we're going to do that, and we're going to focus on creating a person that represents those things I said before: easily identifiable, reachable, substantial, and stable and growing. And this exercise, even though the sheet is really the activity sheet is made for customer markets, it does work for business to business. So stay with me on that, because it's definitely possible. So we're going to name our persona. That you don't really have to name our persona. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is open up the example in my other window here. And that's not it. And so we're going to kind of go through this. I'll go through this with a little few examples and to explain all the parts of this, and then I'll give you time to do it. So you don't really have to be filling it out as we talk, although feel free to move in that direction if you'd like. But I'm going to go through some of this together, and then you can have some time to work on it. So first, the type of persona. You could give it a name. I think I've named mine before in the past, so we will probably do that. First, you're going to figure out who is the persona. Some people have a need to, if they're a B2B, have an influencer or a decider as part of their target market. But for most consumer targets, it's going to be the actual user or the buyer, which is not necessarily the same person, but in this case, we're going to call it the same. So I'm going to actually use a persona for an upscale hair salon, a hip upscale hair salon that targets working women. That's my business. And I'm going to create this persona that I'm going to call Jessie, and she's a user buyer. And we'll start with the left side of this screen, which relates to two categories I described before. It's not calling them that, but it's the demographics and the geographic description. So I'm going to say that my persona, Jessie, is 28 years old. She's a female, and some of these criteria on this sheet may or may not be applicable, but I'm going to just say in terms of she's got some higher education. Okay, she's maybe not has a degree. And then her position is she's self-employed, and so she works at home. That's not surprising right now, but maybe it would have been before. And keep in mind that some of these, as I said, these are not all necessarily critical for you and your particular business. Some of them could be more important, for instance, to the B2B market, like the position of who you're selling to or who they report to or the industry they in. So you don't have to fill this out for every single one of these. In fact, what I'd like to see is this form have a lot more of these extra boxes here where you can add your own. So if you're doing this on paper in a printout, you have no limit to these demographic and geographic things that you could describe. So that criteria needs to match your business. If you have Adobe Acrobat tools, you could also edit this form. But what I want you to think about when you get to this step is measurable, observable aspects of your customer persona. What can you see? What are things that separate from others who are, remember, not your target? What separate them? And so I might, if I was thinking about my persona here, think about their household. And I would say it's either single or married, and maybe married with young children. So that's what I have defined as a successful target market from a household standpoint. Location would be very interesting for a significant for a salon, a service-based interest where the customer typically would go there. So I've done my market research, and I know that most of my customers they live within 25 minutes of my location. And I would go on and add some more of these particular things. So before we go into the right side, I'm going to take a little break here and give you a few minutes to do the first step. So the first step is to name the type of persona and fill out the left side of the column with the facts of a typical customer persona. And these are the demographic and geographic facts that you know about them. And at this point, you probably aren't going to have access to specific data, but you know your customer. And so we're doing this as an example. Maybe later you can go back and you can look up some particular data that might help you with that. So I'm going to mute myself here, and I'm going to give everybody some time to do this as a sample activity on your own. As I said, if you didn't download this sheet, you just need a piece of paper to kind of think about who this persona is and start on those demographics and geographics on this side of the sheet. So let's just take a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds. I know this might not be enough time. Again, we're just kind of whetting the appetite here. So see if you can get at least 6 to 8 facts about demographic and geographic facts about your customer persona. So now that we've kind of gotten a good start on the demographic and the psychographic, we're going to go to the right side. Now the right side has different labels, as I said, thinking, feeling, doing, and going. But these labels represent that category of psychographics and buyer behavior. So we're going to work on that side next. These things are what makes sense about what I called your values, attitudes, and lifestyles. So we're going to tie these to actual preferences of that segment that you're creating as we go back to that right side. So we're going to do the right side. I'll give you some examples or some thoughts, and then I'll let you kind of go at it. As far as this category of thinking, and again, you don't have to necessarily use the prompts on the left side, but there's not a lot of extra space on this form. So these are a good place to start. In the thinking, we're back to those values and attitudes. And again, the pandemic has caused some new beliefs and attitudes to take shape for sure. And their attitudes might really vary based on, their particular circumstances. So a lot of retailers and service industries are having to readdress in this post-pandemic market some of these changed ways of thinking and understand why the consumers might, prefer to, let's say, come back to the brick and mortar options or to continue with digital commerce options like they used to in the buying behavior. So if you can come up with some ideas or even assumptions and opinions that your customers may have, all of those kinds of things are going to be useful in terms of values and attitudes. Our persona might have some ideas about the professionalism and she might not value her own abilities in terms of doing her hairstyling or coloring or something like that. And she might have learned that through the pandemic. She might have experimented herself and learned something through that. So she might have some thoughts about that. The feeling arena is the same kind of area, but I think it has more to do with worries and fears and their interests. So a really good area to focus on this is interest. And the reason that is because if you can focus in on your persona's interests and define interests that are sort of outside your business topic, you're going to have an easier way to locate and reach your customer when you come down to the tactics. I also find this opens doors for co-op marketing, because let's say our buyer, Jessie, let's say one of her big interests is she likes to meet friends for lunch. This was actually more prior to COVID, and then she was shut down, and now she's kind of getting into that again. So she also, she really likes, let's just say she likes fine wines. Well, what do you say this has anything to do with? We're talking about her hair, right? But we're talking about finding out these interests and areas outside of what your customer does related just to your industry. Because if you can find some collective commonalities, you're going to be able to use that again in the tactical side. It might even open doors like for trades and co-op marketing. So maybe, there's some way to add that co-op with somebody who has a business related to her other interests is in dining and wining and dining. So this is an area where you could have many different things. Green marketing could be a thing. This is where an area where you could have concerns. Concerns could be related to preferences for COVID concerns. What is critical? I think someone mentioned they were marketing in a healthcare environment. So some of those concerns for your target market, it might have been a B2B market, but those concerns are still valid for B2B. Is what is it that they're dealing with on this thinking and feeling level? So we'll address those. The next two, doing and going. Doing is about thinking of how other businesses that your customer interacts with and what they do as part of their lifestyle. Another good example from a B2B in this area is when I owned a printing business, my ideal persona was based on a real customer. Actually, it was a pizza chain and they did a lot of printing and they did a lot of event marketing. And that's what a lot of their printing was for. So under this behavior section, I had listed that they attend many events. And so as I used that in my marketing plan and in my analysis, I connected with their need for banners and event signage, which was not a product that I offered. I had printing, I didn't have that. So later when I used that information, it gave me a clue. Either I could start to sell that product and expand my product line, or what I actually did, because I was into my core process here, was a cross promotion deal with the sign company. And the sign company and I, we exchanged our marketing. We added new customers to both of our businesses, and it all became out of this analysis of what my ideal B2B customer was doing. And knowing what they're doing can give you a lot of strength and tactics as you go down the line. So if you're thinking about your, going back to the customer market under doing, think about things like media preferences here. So what social media do they use? So maybe my persona here might say, instead of responsibilities, let's just put media as a category, and let's just say that she's like really big on Instagram and Pinterest. So these are the kinds of things that are going to be helpful, whether it's old school media, new school media. List the media specifically if you can. So try and kind of think in on what it is, what activities that person does. Maybe Jess has a yoga studio, oops, I can't spell, yoga studio membership. So great, maybe I can do something there in terms of cross marketing. But having these things down on paper gives you a lot more ammunition when you get to that tactical area. I would like to see a lot more buyer behavior information on this form. So if you think about how your person operates and buys, go ahead and add that information here. Does this person get regular haircuts every 4 to 6 weeks, or is this person really last minute? That's the kind of thing I would put on here. What things really influence your persona? Like, is she a deal chaser? Does coupons? Or is he a Yelp review reader? So I want you to kind of think about some of those behaviors on this. So let's go back to taking some time on your own, a few minutes for you to think through this right side. Again, don't get too hammered into these prompts on the left. They're important, but you may not have something for everyone. And you might have some of your own to add as you start this idea of thinking about their values, attitudes, lifestyles, and how they purchase. So try and tie these to actual purchase preferences and behaviors. So I'm going to be quiet for another minute or so, and I'd like you to come up with at least 1 or 2 items for each of those categories if you can in the next few minutes. Okay, I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds, kind of wrap up your thoughts, make a few notes down if you want to come back to this later, because this truly is not the amount of time I would desire for you to have on this exercise. So in that interest of time, we're probably not going to fill out the bottom part of it. And I'll just say that, you know, this is sort of an area where you would come to some conclusions, maybe add some more customization to your thinking. For the hair salon, maybe the challenge or the need is that we need quicker turnaround because our persona has kids at home and less time for salon services. Or maybe there's an opportunity that we've come out of this because we know that right next door we have a restaurant and we could do a two-for kind of deal where they get lunch and wine or something that comes out of it. You can use that area for the conclusion. So I'm just going to point that out since we're not going to have time to go over that. So I really want you to think about how this exercise might be different than what you typically think of. So I'm going to have you just answer the poll. You know, this exercise was easy, eye-opening, difficult, or other. And if you have an other, just put something in the chat to kind of explain. Just take a minute and see how is this different than what you usually do when you think of your customers.
Okay, I'm going to give you guys about 15 more seconds on this, and then we'll share the results.
Just part of the interaction. It gives me some feedback. Was this easy? Was it, wow, eye-opening? Okay. Or difficult? Or I got some other thoughts on that, Heidi. So this is really good. A lot of you had some new ideas about your customer. And some of you are putting into chat that they're still trying to find out customers and they need to get know their customers a little bit better. So this was kind of the idea. Well, this actually is the idea about this, is that what we want to see is you've got some new things that you might be considering. And often when we do this, if you spend enough time on this, there will be some aha moments. There will be some surprises that might come up for you that could lead to some new ways, this new perception I'm talking about in terms of your marketing. Really, the goal of the exercise is to capture some of these things and to start to build your strategy around, again, that customer. There's another whole course that I've taught, which is about cloning your customer. So the persona activity is really a great tool for that. The more that you can really define like your best, I call them the best and the easy. So if you think of your best customer or maybe the easiest customer you ever had, if you can go through this exercise with those kind of descriptors and get as discreet as you can and think about cloning your customers, like making more F's out of them. The other purpose, as I already mentioned, is that you come up with new marketing methods because these are sort of triggers that will help you as you come up with some creativity and some other things. Like anything, this activity, there's levels of effort that are going to deliver higher results. So the more thought you put in it, the more thorough, the more in depth, the results are going to get better and better. But even just doing a 10-minute exercise like this, and we didn't even do full 10 minutes, it's going to give you the insights that you might be able to start to use to hone in on your marketing. Or it also could disclose some challenges. Maybe if for instance, that you find that your representative, your persona matches up to a segment that you maybe don't think is very good at being reachable. For instance, you couldn't define a lot of activities or media preference. Like if you're having a hard time in that reachable section, maybe this segment isn't as positive for you as you can, or else you need to do some more work in that area. So going back to whether or not this segment is reachable, substantial, stable, all those definitions, that's really important. really our ability to keep moving forward in this post-pandemic marketing arena is about understanding what consumers are doing and getting into their heads. So this could be an ongoing topic that you might want to do. You might work on if you have a SBDC counselor. I mentioned, and I'll show you some other growth wheels. There's a lot of consumer market research that's available for yourself online. You can just go online and look at things that are out there. I've found surveys of consumers post-pandemic about their attitudes of online purchase behavior, about service purchase behavior. And then, as I mentioned, the SBDC counselors have those other resources. So they can go to SBDC Net or IBIS for inquiries that might help with defining your target market. So there's a lot of ways to dig a little bit deeper, and customer surveys come to mind, talking with your frontline staff when you are offering some of your sales promotions, which I'm going to talk about in segment 2 in next session. Sales promotions with some kind of a tie-in to information back, so you can learn more about your customer behavior and trade for some kind of deal you're giving them. There are more and more and more ways that you are going to continue to find out about your customer market information. So what to do with this next? So as I said, you make sure that you can try and get this market identifiable, reachable, sustainable, and stable. I want you to kind of write this up. How are you going to communicate and use this? That's the next way that you would use this. So after you clarify and get that really clear. You could also then do the process again with additional segments, because it's very rare that you would have one entirely homogeneous segment of all customers. So it's likely that you're going to have different segments. I don't think you need to do a ton of different segments, but if you have some really strong, unique segments that would require different kinds of marketing, and that will come through by doing this activity, it's really good to do a persona for each of those segments, so that you can actually have some tactics that might be unique and tailor in the messaging. So you might want to think about, I've talked about cloning and profiling your successful customers. You might want to also think about customer groups that could be more attractive than than the customers you already have right now. So kind of think outside the box. And as I said, that's an area where you can get survey data, mine your own data, involve other members of your team. There's a lot of different ways that you can start to access that data. The other step, the working with the SBDC counselor, I mentioned to you that Growth Wheel has more of these decision sheets. So they have one on customer segments, one on favorite customers, they have one on customization, and this is more about getting your products to match those different segments. And if you have a service business, this is far easier to do than you think. So these are some other tools that an SBDC counselor can use to work with you and help you get more discreet in terms of all of these co-related marketing decisions. So use your notes, get a more coherent description, and then do those other customers personas, work with an SBDC counselor. Now, once you have your target market defined, then you can move on to starting to update your positioning, which is where your business stands in the world, and creating what I call a unique selling proposition. And that just happens to be where we're going next. Okay. So before I get there, I'm going to tell you a little story. So there was this shopkeeper, and he was really dismayed when there was a brand new business that was very similar to his own, and they just opened up right next door to him. And they put up a huge sign that said best deals. And I know we don't all have shops like this, but we all might have a customer or a competitor that comes up to us. And then another competitor moved in right next door on the other side, and he announced his arrival with an even larger sign that said lowest prices. So the shopkeeper started to be in a panic until he got an idea, and he put the biggest sign of all on his own shop, and it said main entrance. So it's supposed to be a humorous way to tell you a little bit about the right audience, the right message, the right product, the right time, and introduced this idea of positioning. So the shopkeeper in the story, because of his competitors believed, and maybe his target market analysis that he did, he believed that price was the main purchase criteria for his customers. May or may not be true. We're not getting into that. But the story is about the shop owner's fears that he hadn't communicated to them in the way that would most address their most primary buying criteria. It was a clever solution. It's not exactly how it works. Obviously, if you're marketing online, you are competing heavily for things like AdWords and search optimization and all of that. So the secret to marketing that I shared earlier at the bottom there, the right audience, right message, right product, and right timing, is that if we can position ourselves in this marketplace to really serve that specific group of customers that are seeking a specific set of benefits, then we will be closer to achieving this magic formula. And positioning is really important to doing that. It's the next strategic element after you've defined your target market. So we're going to use it. I'm going to go through it really quickly and then give you a little bit of time to play with it and just enough to kind of whet your appetite again. So positioning is also known as your competitive advantage. It's also been called value proposition. It's articulated sometimes into this unique selling proposition, but it's really a way that you're going to serve that specific group with specific benefits. If I were to ask you, what is the most obvious consideration in creating a positioning strategy? Well, I guess you're all muted. I can't really ask you that, but I'm guessing as I was saying that your thought or your answer is probably going to be price. And I already gave you that example. So that was the story of the 3 storefronts. But price is really not the only criteria. I just want to address pricing up front. Because I want you to know, we're not talking about cost-based pricing, figuring out your pricing in terms of what you need to make. We're talking about marketing pricing or value-based pricing. Your pricing that sends a message to the consumer. So some businesses have been extremely successful with really high pricing. So they've got a great strategy that matches that high pricing, appropriate messaging, like luxury cars that sell more from others like, Jaguar, Lexus, Mercedes. And these products have these higher price points and prestige and exclusivity and the things that make those products come more desirable. So that's the kind of pricing. But the truth is that it goes both ways. People don't always want the most expensive and they don't always want the least expensive. People always thought, well, everybody wants the lowest price. That story example is about everybody wants the lowest price, but it's not true. There are a bunch of products out there that have failed based on their pricing strategies. Different kinds of shelf products that come out too low, people will associate them with not having a higher quality. So low price sometimes can be the critical decision-making factor. Higher prices can sometimes indicate quality, but when we do our positioning maps, I'll show you a little bit more about the role that price may or may not play in terms of your marketing strategy. Understanding your target market is what's going to help you determine whether those low prices and discounting should be part of your positioning, or if definitely that's not part of your positioning. And a warning, most entrepreneurs we've done some research that shows that most are far more likely to underprice themselves rather than overprice themselves because of their beliefs about their customers and their products. So let me give you some examples of positioning, but actually before I do it, I'd like you to take a stab at thinking about 2 important factors that you think impact that target market that you defined regarding buying your product. See if you can narrow it down to 2 important factors. You can write it down somewhere or share it in the chat or just remember it, but I want you to give a little bit of a pause here. What are, if you had to think of 2? Quality and price, we're going to talk about that. So it can be a little bit harder than you think, and we're going to get a lot more granular than we just think about in terms of quality. And I'll tell you how important it is to get a little bit more specific. So in order to do that, I'm going to start with a definition. So when we think about positioning and those hold on to those 2 qualities. Everybody think about those 2 qualities and we're going to use them. So don't give them up. Just keep them out there. When we think of positioning, we think about 2 definitions. That is the customer's perception. So it does not matter what we think about our products or services. It's about the customer's perception. It's really hard for many business owners to do this because, again, you're getting into the heads of the customer, and the customer is like, a proud parent, and they're the owner creator of the product service, and they want it to be exactly what they think it should be. But the reality is, it doesn't matter what you think as a business owner. It's really about what the customer thinks. And then comparing it to other options, which we would call competitors in a lot of the cases. We'll compare it to competitive options. And that's really all that positioning is. It's the relationship of your offering from the eye of the customer and related to competitors or other options. So the 2 main types of advantages, several of you have already said, oh, I got a lower price, or I have a lower price and obviously I've got just as great a quality. Okay. You might use those, and many of you could say that you're going to use those, and we will actually talk about using those. But I think there's another advantage that might have more value in your marketing strategy. And that is to think about anything unique and desirable that you have that's not available from the competition. So that's something that you probably already know, and you may already be using that in your marketing, but maybe not taking enough advantage of it strategically. So a lot of businesses are positioned what I call positioned by default. And this way you can go through this process, you can use it proactively, and you can use it more consistently to improve your effectiveness. So it helps you understand what we're going to go through as far as mapping is going to help you understand this for communicating it. We create sort of a visual of 2 different buying criteria. More sophisticated models can be multidimensional, and you can just do it over and over with more criteria. But we're going back to using that, remember that target market segment or persona that you created, because that's who we're thinking about, who's creating that perception. So let me give you a very basic tutorial or example on what this positioning map means. And we're using that most basic definition of price on one axis, so low price to high price, and quality, low quality to high quality, because this is 2 common positioning arenas. So if I'm looking at the position up here, A, which is for very high price and decently high quality, what type of customer segment do you think this business's position will serve? So feel free to respond in the chat. So what do you think position A represents in terms of what type of buyer? What kind of a buyer? So if you can think about who would be buying high price, high quality. Yeah, price is no object. So these are either maybe a very luxury brand seeker. Luxury is a great word. If you said sophisticated buyer, price no object, you are on the right track. Okay, that's exactly position A. I love the car. We're going to go into cars. So then let me ask you this one. And this one, I'm going to have you do a poll. I really want you to think about this one. I want you to think of an example of a company that is best positioned here in position B. So Donna has a poll. Out of these 3 options, which company, and we're going to do a quickie on this poll, so we might not get everybody's answer, but really quickly weigh in. Don't overthink it. Who is in that position of a high quality, kind of lower price provider? Give me your gut reaction. All right, let's just move forward if we can with the responses that we have. Oh gosh, you guys are A+ students, even though this was positioning B. So you're right. So Costco's published mission, they actually have a published mission that says to continually provide members with quality goods and services at the lowest possible prices, which puts them somewhere here. Maybe they're not always the lowest price. So their mission statement is absolute to their business model and strategy, which compared to the other option, Walmart's, their positioning statement and their verbatim say, among price sensitive customers, so they're talking about only price sensitive, Walmart is the brand of retailer that provides convenience of one-stop shopping. Wow, at the lowest price, one-stop shopping, convenience, that's not necessarily even one of our matrix. So Walmart's map would probably have completely different criteria on one of their axes. And that's what we're going to talk about. But as we go through these other examples, how about Dollar Tree? Wouldn't it make sense for position C to be the spot where Dollar Tree is positioning? So they're the unrivaled, their statements say they're the unrivaled king of the single price point, or they're explicitly all about price, 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 and not always about quality. And I'm going to go on a little bit of a soapbox a little bit later about quality and defining quality more specifically, because if you don't define it explicitly, it's not going to have the accuracy and communication that it needs. But before we do that, I want to ask this. What do you think? Is there any opportunity for a provider up here in position D? So in an perceptual map that uses price and quality, quadrant D is probably empty or has very few providers. And the cause could be, some of the suggestions in here, the cause could be a really niche product, but usually it might be very much closer into the axis points. Because if a provider was way over here and they're really high priced and they're very low quality, it could end up, and remember, this is the mind of the consumer, it could be very overpriced and seen as a ripoff. And they may purchase it once, but they probably aren't going to build loyalty. But I will say that, again, this analysis is valuable because position D could have some advantages. If it's something that maybe, like you said, has some social, somebody mentioned social influencers, which we're going to talk about next session. But it also could be that maybe there's some particularly niche arena, and that there could be a way that they might be somewhere near here where they're a decent price. And I'll give you an example of that, what it could be. So this is a generic positioning map. I'm going to give you some examples to give you a better feel for how this could be used. Emergencies, that's another good one, guys. So cars are easy to pull this off with, so I'm going to look at cars. And you can see I'm using the same axis points of quality and price, the same generic overview axis points, and I put some top auto brands. I didn't do the research, and let's just assume somebody backed this up with research. I did double check on it, and I want to show you in terms of competitive positioning, what do you think is the top selling car if this chart is accurate in terms of positioning? What do you think is the top selling auto brand visual on this chart? And you can put a guess in chat, or you can just think of it, because you know I'm going to tell you the answer in about 2 seconds. You guys got it. So Toyota, and my data is from 2019, a little bit late, but Toyota was the largest brand. It had market share of about 10%, followed by these three: Volkswagen, Ford, and Honda. So these were the leading car brands right here, stuck very close to the center axis. So I'm not trying to say that that's a preferred position. I'm just showing that you don't necessarily have to have the lowest price or the highest quality. In fact, to sell a lot, if quantity is your game, this could be important to you to think about. Where is it that I'm going to sell the most? Another question on this map, because I just talked about quadrant D. If I'm mini, it's just up and over from the leaders. Do you think this is the right position on the chart for me? Back in quadrant D. It kind of looks like an awful place, right? High price, low quality. Well, the truth is it's kind of the wrong criteria for mini, so you'd be right if you said, no, that's not a good place. But it's actually a little bit accurate as well, because Mini Cooper's positioning statement is articulated in arenas not based on quality and price. So it's not really the right criteria for them. But if they're placed on, let's say, Ford's positioning chart, which is based on those criteria, or somebody else's, this is where they would fall. What they would like to do is be positioned on a chart that has to do with fun and practical Their positioning, they have words like iconic design, go-kart feeling. These are the things that they want to be on a positioning chart. So changing the criteria based on the things that your customer segment values is really critical. You can't just slap up this same criteria and expect it to inform your marketing well. That's why we need to know our target markets, needs, wants, and behaviors. So to give you another example in the car world, because I think it's always good to show you something else. This is a different map with different criteria. This is the luxury car market. We took out price completely, right? This is the luxury. It changes the criteria. So the labels are, if we're going at sort of looks, if you will, you know, how it looks on the y-axis, aggressive design versus elegant design. And we're going more for the experience on this, on the horizontal axis. I'm not a car aficionado, so I don't really understand all of this, but the important thing to notice in these examples is that these automobile companies do a great job at positioning their brands in the minds of consumers. And if you look at it, you can see that these particular criteria are more important than just a simple quality. These criteria, comfort and performance, may be examples of quality to the buyer, but they're not just, it's not just quality. So they've started to define it. And I would take from this, I would assume from this, that even though they're not the same thing, that there might be some trade-off in terms of a luxury car in comfort and performance, like the higher performance may have to sacrifice some comfort. So maybe that's why these are two ends to that axis, to explain that. One more, and this one's just for the ladies who aren't into cars. So here's an example of a beauty product positioning, and it's referring to nail polish and the main traits. So the main traits have to do with quality, and quality is another one of those, you know, generic things. But let's just say that the professionalism of it lends certain of the professional brands up here on the higher quality, and maybe some brands that are, you know, more over the counter on here. So durability and those things are important. But the other axis they've decided has to do with color selection, has to do with the variety of color selection. So, you know, bold colors versus classic elegant colors. And the interesting thing about this was from a real marketing plan where SE said, you know what, our biggest competitor is OPI. SE is a direct competitor of OPI. And they said our strategy to go head with OPI is that we need to maybe top them in terms of quality by a little bit. So the arrow is pointing to where we want, if OPI is here, we want to move us up a little bit. So we want our reputation of quality to be just a tad better than OPI, but we need to move from down here where we're only classic and elegant in our color selection. We want to be up here, right, or up here, right on that axis, because we want to capture some of these daring, bold color things. We need to position ourselves to have more than just elegance. We want to have boldness in all of those colors. So their strategy is to move from here up to here, and that's where their marketing and their messaging and everything will begin to do that. Now, why they picked that strategy, I don't have the data, but something told them in their customer market definition that that's where they needed to be if they're going to compete with OPI. So let's go back. This is going to be your turn. I asked you to think of two main criteria. And if you haven't already, then you can go back to that question. What if you had to narrow it down to two key aspects? What would you do? And again, this is from the customer's perspective. So you have to get it down to the main ideas. I recommend thinking as if that's why you create that persona that we started on, so that it's not your mind, it's their mind. And then I want you to add to the two criteria. I want you to think about what are the benefits they seek. So not the criteria of just why they buy, that's two criteria, also two benefits they want. So think about two benefits and two criteria, and we're going to use that in a second. From the customer's perspective, this answer to these questions can sometimes be aided by this type of thought. What would you say if you were in person selling this customer on your services and benefits? So if you think about what you're going to say, it might help you find out what those criteria are and what those benefits are. And then add, well, what would you say if at this exact moment they were actively considering your competitor? That's how you can get more specificity in choosing what those criteria are. So there's a bunch of different ideas over here on this side. So these are general things. Saves time, quality, convenience, reliability, green. This is not an exhaustive list. I'm just giving you some ideas. Your gut instinct is almost always to pick general ideas like convenience and quality. So what I'd say is if you start out with that, try and go a little bit deeper. It's okay to start there. Think generally. Quality is important. Now start to think about, what does quality mean? What specifically could quality mean? Maybe quality, go back to the auto dealers, maybe there's something to do with how economical it's designed in terms of, saving the environment and saving money on gas. Is there something that is most important, maybe due to COVID, that changes your positioning? Sometimes I think it's helpful for me to give examples. Sometimes I don't, so I won't over example you to death, but we're trying to get into defining in a more granular way than broad terms. And I'm going to kind of give you a reason why that's important. So compared to the competition, the percent of businesses who claim each of these is their unique advantage. 31% of businesses surveyed say their unique advantage is service, and 24 say price. So my answer to that is that if compared to their competition, 31% are saying service, is it really all that unique? Is your differentiation really different? In the positioning map, would you be one bubble on top of 20 other bubbles in the same area? If you can get more specific, it's a good thing. You will see more areas of comparison that you can bring on to your customers when it comes to the competition. So I'd like you to think about more precise answers, addressing customers' pain points or needs, or looking back at that segment. And we're not going to have a ton of time to go through a lot more examples. But I do think that there is a lot of ways that we can go beyond this idea of saying that quality is our only descriptor. So there's a couple examples. I just want to show you one of them. Different value. These are fast foods. Value versus health. So that could be one axis. So a lot of my clients will say, well, do I actually need to create the map? Do I actually have to have a map? No, you don't have to have one, but it's not an academic exercise. It's a great way to check that your brand has a clear positioning and has something more decisive, and it will help you make it easier to communicate to your customers. But the second reason that I recommend this is that idea of the eureka, or taking a new eye, a beginner's eye at your own market, is how to think about how the consumers look at you and whether or not it's actually lining up with what you say your product is. So it's kind of just doing some validation. One of the things that I recommend could be surveys, and these could be simple polls and surveys that you do on social media, that you're willing to get some frank answers about what people think about your brand or your products. The other thing that I use perceptual maps for, positioning maps, is to identify any gaps, or to see where you might be getting crowded out if there's too much competition. So this is kind of a more sophisticated arena. Let's say you put your competitors all over the map and you're right here. If you were to look at these areas that I have in square blues, these could be areas of opportunity. You could say, wow, in my industry, there is no Lexus, there is no high price, high quality, or OPI, or whatever the comparable is. Maybe that's an opportunity for you to expand your product line, or to develop something that meets those particular buyer needs. Or maybe you're finding that you're in the middle of the crowd and you want to separate yourself in some way, and you can think about how to do that. So you can also size your markers if you want to let you know what size of market share they have, you know, a bigger customer versus a smaller customer. There's a lot of sophisticated ways that you can do it. So you don't have to do this, but I'd like to just do a little quick exercise, another, you know, 5 to 10 minute exercise to work with these ideas while they're fresh on your mind, to see if they can pull out some new, fresh things that you can use with your marketing strategy. So we're going to take a few minutes with that. We're going to use another tool that I shared that is in the downloadable. It's also, Donna put it up in the chat. Way to go, Donna. And it's going to look like this. Again, if you didn't download it, use a blank sheet of paper, because we can probably get pretty far along without that. This one is just for you, because if later on you want to go back to it, you need some instructions, it has the instructions. So it'll be using the same worksheet. And so I'm going to actually jump back into my examples. And we're going to just go through this again. I'm going to run through it as an example very, very quickly. And then I'm going to give you some time to think about it on your own for your own visit. So this time I'm going to try and do a B2B or business to business type of product, or it could be business to business or business to consumer. It could be either one. I'm going to be a manufacturer of environmental friendly paint. So I create paint. I call it, I hope this isn't a real business because I'm trying to make a pretend business, Earth Eco Paint. And that's my business. Always, I like the dates on things because it just helps you if you do this as you revisit it, which you should do kind of on an annual basis, if not more. Gives you an idea of where your perceptions were at that time, or where you thought they were. So I've got this business, and remember I asked you earlier, let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you guys. I asked you to think of 2 main criteria, and then I asked you to think of 2 primary benefits. And this is so we have a lot of choices before we really decide what the access is. It's going to give us some things to play with. So if I'm thinking about my business, these Earth Eco Paint, what my customer research has told me is that they like that I have, their business decision is because I have eco-friendly solutions. And that is one of their main reasons for buying us. So that when they're looking at the paint, that's one of their first cuts. Is it eco-friendly? And then their other is, it's a very longer lasting product. So that's why my customers buy us. Those are their criteria. They need it to last long, and it has to be eco-friendly. But then I'm like, well, yeah, how does that translate into an actual benefit? Well, why do we want eco-friendly? Well, I'm not going to put them all down here, but boy, they like that it's non-hazardous, that it's not poisonous. Maybe there's, you know, other earth friendlies. So that's really what they're seeking. They don't need it just because it says eco-friendly. They need it to do the things, the benefits of an eco-friendly. And same with longer lasting. Let's say that, well, longer lasting, well, that's really great. But the real thing is that they want to be able to get better coverage with good color retention, because if it's longer lasting, then maybe this will make it more cost advantage, so that if it lasts a longer time, I could maybe spend a little bit more money on it, on my paint, and it'll last a longer time. So these are some of the things that I have to think about when I'm thinking about all the paint brands that I compete against. So you play with these ideas before you come up. Sorry, my typos here, guys. You think about these as you're lining up what those axes are going to be. And you can play with several of these charts before you really think about what your best positioning is. You may have to get your competitors on there before you really see what you're trying to see. So in this case, I've decided that definitely this long lasting thing is going to be really, really important. So I think that long lasting is going to be the top of the vertical axis, and then maybe shorter lasting is down here. So it's a little bit like quality, if this rings a bell, but I'm being very specific about what quality means. On this axis, let's just say, since it's a cut and dry criteria that the eco-friendliness of it, let's say that there are some products that could be less eco-friendly And then there's some that are really more eco-friendly. So by doing this, I've narrowed it down to some very specific things that I know impact my target market as I've defined them earlier on. And this is where my PDF doesn't lend itself to actually positioning myself. It gets a little tricky in Adobe. You have to be able to use the comment tool and everything to position it. So I'll show you how to do that. But if you are using pen and paper, it might be a little bit easier. So I'm going to say my company as diagnosed, and I'm going to use these comments here. This is not something you can do if you don't have Adobe Pro. I'm going to actually say that we position Earth Eco Paint. Is that my, yeah, Earth Eco Paint as being, you know, very long lasting and very eco-friendly. So I'm saying our position is right here. And then I've actually looked at some market studies that I got some data from the industry association that creates paint, and they did some testing to actually verify the eco-friendliness of different paints. So I used that data to start to look at some of my competition. So I found out that actually there's another less eco-friendly that's pretty long lasting. And guys, I don't know anything about paint, so I'm just making this up, but Behr paint comes in right here, right up high, almost as high as me on long lasting, but they're really not very eco-friendly. And then there's another brand, and I don't have an example of this, so I'm just going to make one up, called cheap brand paint that doesn't last at all, and they're not eco-friendly at all. They're pretty, they pollute, they're poisonous, and all that kind of stuff. And they're here, and I go on and on and on. So I'm really just trying to give you an idea of how this works. Now, does it mean you need to get some industry research data that you could actually quantify this and do this very objectively? That would be great, but I'm not expecting that, particularly right now. I just want you to play with this idea of putting your business's attributes and buying criteria on a map that you think is the most important to your customer and relate some of your competition to that. So we're going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to give you sort of, these are the walkthrough of the instructions. You're going to note the buying criteria. You're going to note the benefits sought. So that was these two answers right here. And then you're going to decide, because you're going to have 4 different things that you could be looking at, or even more if you had a lot. You're going to choose some of those parameters and create access points on your map. Oops. And then you're going to look at where your business would align to that on the map. And then try and spend some time to put at least one or more of your competitors on the map. So I'm going to give you some minutes to do that. I'm going to take my mouth off the mic here. And take some time to at least get through putting yourself and a competitor on 2 different access points.
So, excuse me, Heidi, we actually did have a question in the Q&A. Would you recommend doing this position map for each of our customer personas, or simply keeping in mind the common criteria for purchasing in our target market / customer personas?
That's a really, really good question, because I've seen it done both ways. Well, one of the things is it depends on what your products and services are. If you have a single product line and you can't rebrand for your different market segments, then it might be necessary for you to look and see where you stand on 2 different criteria based on your market segments. But let's say both of your segments do have very, very similar overlapping criteria, like price, for instance. You could end up putting it all on there and get some information. Ultimately, and it's more work, ultimately, I would do a positioning map for every key segment, because the strategy, I would also do a separate marketing strategy for every key segment, and the strategy evolves out of your segmentation and your positioning. So that would be the very highest goal, but something's better than nothing. It's an old saying that I use for a lot of things. Something's better than nothing. You will find good information if you have a single product and you have a couple of different segments, but there's some overlap in terms of that product value that you could put on a single map. Better than nothing. I hope that answers it a little bit. Somebody else put in the chat that the access point, could the access point be price and functionality? I think it absolutely could, but I would go back to that question. What's the benefit of the functionality? Think more, see if you can get that functionality to be a little bit more specific. Maybe you can't, but because I don't know what your product or service is, but think if you can define it a little bit more specifically. So just like quality in my paint example could be long lasting, functionality could mean a lot of different things. You know, maybe if you were creating, I don't know, this silly product, sheets, and your sheets function because they were easy to get on the beds and off the beds, that's a different function than keeping you warm at night, which is a null function. So think about it as specific as you can get it. All right, I'll shut up for a few minutes because I want you to take a few minutes of time to actually go through this. If you have other questions, let Donna know. So I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds. Has everybody had enough time to get at least one or two competitors in addition to yourself on your chart? Maybe, I don't think I can see raise hands, but raise your hand if you need a little bit more time. Donna, can you see raise hands?
I am not seeing any, so I think we are good to go.
Okay. So hopefully you've had enough time to get a little bit of a flavor for the exercise, if not really going into the sort of a deeper dive to it. It's not intended necessarily that you have to have 100% accuracy in terms of your positioning of your competition to have it have validity, but I keep going back to those criteria of definition of positioning, which is from the customer's perspective and in relation to the competition. So the more objective you can be, and we'll talk about how that might happen. But before that, we only plotted 2 criteria. Maybe you didn't add many competitors, but looking at your map, I want to ask you, how does your positioning reflect the answer you gave for your business specialty at the beginning? So remember, I asked you for your specialty, not everybody did it. How does your positioning match up with what your answer was regarding your business specialty? Maybe it's the exact same. Maybe it got a little more defined. Maybe it's close, but now it's a little bit different. Or maybe you've expanded it in a big way. Or maybe it's not even the same, it's just all different. So think about that answer that you had in your head or you put in chat. Give me some feedback.
Yeah, I'll give everyone about 15 more seconds. It looks like only 5 of you have voted.
This is a hard one. You might want to give them a little more time. This is really hard for them to think about. How closely does what I created with this complex positioning map compare to what I just said top of my mind about my specialty? So think about it, guys.
There we go. They needed your pep talk, Heidi.
Yeah, it's just, no, it's a tough question. This is a tough question.
Okay, now how about 15 more seconds?
Yep. Wrap it up. What do you guys think? Some of them it's hard because they didn't answer in the beginning or they weren't here and they didn't hear the question, but they have to rhetorically think, well, what would I have said? So clearer. A lot of you said clearer, some said similar but different, some said expanded. Basically, a lot of you have maybe created the same concept that you have in maybe your current marketing plan, whether your marketing plan's written or not. And maybe you've just really put it on paper, that exact positioning. But usually this activity, if you spend some time with it, other than the 10 minutes we did, is going to get you a lot more clearer. Sometimes you get the bonus of it being very expanded or having a new eureka, something completely different that that comes out of it as you picture your company right there with your competitors. So I think in debriefing this one is, as you do picture your company with your competitors, it's one of those other things that you need to do with your business every now and then anyway, might as well incorporate it into your marketing plan. And that is, how do you need to really evaluate what you could improve to better appeal to your target market? So not only just matching up with what you know about that customer segment, but then evaluating your own business's qualities and say, you know, how I now understand more about what the customer wants. What am I delivering? How am I delivering on that? The other thing is that during COVID, this became ultra apparent, and people got really good at doing this on the fly. So this is not something that takes a whole lot of over analysis, but we really need to be adaptable more and more today. And we really need to do that adapting, not in response to just what our neighbors are doing or the competitors are doing, which is important. It's in relation to them, but also in response to the customer's needs. And the customer's needs are always evolving and changing. So we want to keep using this positioning and keep addressing those pain points from the customers. Another thing that to ask yourself as you debrief yourself for this is, are there some areas that I thought were really important that are not so important? The more and less important thing is sometimes where people discover the surprise. They thought that price was so important, but when they actually did this exercise, it turned out that that was not the most important of the 2 criteria if they had to pick 2. So maybe some factors need to be emphasized a little bit less in your marketing to make room for those other factors, to make room for the factors that are going to distance you from your competition. If you and your competition all have the same pricing, that's not really the big messaging story. It's the things that are going to be distinctly different that you want. So the question that I often get is how to make this exercise objective. And I've already mentioned a couple ways, but I'm going to reiterate it here. The horse's mouth is always great. If you can make an objective, well-designed survey and find out from your customers the answers to some of these decisions about, you know, how they're going to make their purchase decision, what are their biggest criteria. It's really hard sometimes to get authentic answers. So making your surveys anonymous and having them well designed by somebody who can lead with questions that don't have bias is important. So that would help make the exercise more valid. But you can also go, like I said, to secondary resources out there in the research world. I love industry data. So if you belong to an industry related to your service or product, go there first. They may have some ideas about this that will really help you. You can also just ask, you know, very informal questions, but I would always try and vary and make sure you have both open and closed-ended. So like the pizza guy could say to his current customer, hey, why do you like our pizza over our competition? That's good. That gives you know, some general responses, but then they might also ask them to rate the importance of specific things such as taste or ingredients or atmosphere in their restaurant or time frame of order to meal time. You really would be surprised how honest people can be when you ask them how you can improve what you're doing. So the more objective, the more thorough, the more in depth that you can do this activity, the better the results are going to be. But even this non-research based exercise may have given you a few insights. So I see a couple of things in chat. Is this typically a way to illustrate the competitive landscape for a pitch deck? This can be a very valid way to show the competitive landscape. The more that you can substantiate it or back it up with some of the objective data, the better. Okay, so you might have, you know, done some of your homework and your research to be able to show that. But I like it as a way of showing it in a pitch deck because it demonstrates more than one thing. It demonstrates, you know, your competition, but it also demonstrates, you know, your customer and the decision-making aspects of purchasing your product. So I think it is a good, it's not the only way, but it is a good way. How do you find an affordable survey preparer? Oh gosh, that is an interesting question. I do know that some of the SBDC counselors may have worked with some vendors in the past. And you also, again, this is the day of self-marketing. There's a lot of good online resources that will help you template out some surveys. So they will give you some phrasing in terms of some unbiased content. If you are working with an SBDC counselor, because we have co-counseling marketing specialists, you could ask them to review your survey. You could take a stab at it and then work with them on getting just the feedback on, are these questions, is this the right length of number of questions? Are these questions going to yield the results that I want to know? Before you even start with even outsourcing it or doing it yourself, really get clear on what it is you're trying to know about your customer in terms of those. If you're going to be using it for this positioning, make sure that your questions really relate to defining what are their main purchasing criteria, what are the benefits that they're seeking, what are their pain points. So these are some of the things that you would want to do. I want to bring up that I didn't use the positioning map that Growth Wheel has, but they do have a complex version of a positioning map. You can't use it as easily online, so I didn't use it, but they do have more of a scoreboard that you can put your competitors on. You can name more than 2 different criteria here at the bottom. So, and then you just kind of rank them on a scale. So this is another way that you could, even in a pitch deck, kind of demonstrate some competitive landscape by having a different competitors, different colors on this kind of graph. There's always more ways to do this. I'm just showing you sort of some basic ways. So next steps as we wind down here, I would ask yourself more questions as a result of this. After you spend some time and you really feel like you've done your work with that positioning map, ask yourself, would the positioning you sketched out ring true with your customers right now? And that's where that survey could come in. Is your analysis objective? What information else could you gather? And then, then the obvious one, is your position actually unique? Are there tons of other people in there? One of the things that I would suggest you do after you look at that positioning is see, do you have a bunch of other competitors clustered right around you? That's a good sign that you're not very unique. You know, compared to one where you see there's a big open spot somewhere on that positioning map that nobody's serving, that you could identify a segment of the market that needs it. So it is sometimes a way of learning about a new customer segment that could not be well served that you might work into. So then spend some time on this. The next step to translate this into what we're going to cover in session 2 about messaging is going to be to do what's called a USP, or a unique selling proposition. So a unique selling proposition is to try and digest this into a single statement, usually one sentence, maybe it's 2, that really tells your audience what you do for whom in a way that's going to provide that benefit differentiation, which is why you needed this positioning exercise, because you need that benefit differentiation. Some people call this an elevator pitch. I'm saying that this is the basis of your marketing messaging. So it doesn't have to be worded in a way that you're ever going to use to tell your customer this. It's not about a slogan or an elevator pitch. It's really for you to use as the benchmark or the litmus test to measure all your messaging against and say, does my messaging communicate what I do for whom and with what benefits and differentiation to competition? So it's going to be your secret criteria, held close to your chest criteria, not the publishable criteria. And then you're going to look at that compared to your persona and see, oh, does this match? Now, some people might already have a slogan that's halfway there, or an elevator pitch that covers this. And so you can already look at that and say, is this really addressing that differentiation that I want to address? Or is it just simply saying, you know, what my company makes and maybe not anything about the differentiate? Does it have the word quality in it? That's a red flag. What do you mean by quality? Does it say better service? What do you mean by better service? That's what I want you to do. This is the first step into going forward on the marketing. If your homework assignment, if you choose to accept it, once you have a solid idea of your positioning. And let me just say that if you need some help, I have a templated version of that, and I will offer that as part of our survey at the end of this. I think, Donna, they'll have a place, if they put their email, we can send them a copy of a template for the unique selling proposition. You can also work with your SBDC counselor on both those growth wheel decision sheets and that other positioning tool, just brainstorming what those criteria could be in your positioning. You could compare this again to your marketing efforts. And this is a big thing to look for. Wasteful promotion that doesn't match what you put in your buyer's lifestyle and purchase behaviors. So back to that, if we go back to our customer persona, things in the doing and going area, if you are spending marketing in media that doesn't match, or any of these areas that doesn't match what you put down there for your persona, that's a red flag. So try and look at that and say, what am I doing that could be wasteful? When you do that, you're refining your cost effectiveness. I also think another next step is to attend the next 2 sessions. So we have we've spaced them several weeks apart so that you have time to really think and work on this, and not just be tempted to put this aside on a shelf for 2 weeks. We're going to talk about messaging, and we're going to talk about influencing the customer next session. So that's the sales promotion part. And then on the last session, it's a lot, we cover a lot, but we talk about actual tactics to choose from, how to choose tactics and how to measure your success, and how to compare sort of the costs among different types of products. And I mean distribution of marketing messages, so different media, different techniques. And so next week, I'll also talk a little bit about content planning and how that works. I guess we're at the end of our time here. Anybody have any questions? Were there any questions that we put out?
I don't see any in the chat or in the Q&A, but we can certainly give people some time to gather their thoughts.
Good. Well, I do have a couple of reminders. So if you have a question, Donna will interrupt me. First of all, there is going to be a survey. You have to click through it at the end. I'd like you to give me feedback on what we're doing, because that's helpful in me perfecting my product. Also, there's a place you don't have to put your email, but if you do, then we will send you that template. It's just to fill in the blanks for doing that homework on the USP. Any of you who are not already clients and have an SBDC counselor, this is the link to our website. Actually, good, Donna's beat me to it, put it in the chat. So that's just if you wanted to start working with a counselor, and maybe some of these topics or some of the topics, but there are a ton of other things that you might want to work through with them. As I said, the growth wheel tools have, I think there's like 120 decision sheets that you could be working on with them. So you can also go online. Let me back up. You can also go online and see more about the training events that are coming up, which I'm going to talk to you about in a little bit. These are the next 4. So this is by no means exhaustive about what's coming up, but in case some of these topics are useful for you, we're going to have one of our counselors who talk about patents. So if there's something that you're trying to think about patenting, you can get some information. The IRS has an informational seminar that we're co-sponsoring with them, which can be helpful in this time of confusing financial stuff. And then the export seminar is going to be on May 10th. So if you're interested in exporting, then that's a really good walkthrough on that. And then if you are looking for venture capital, one of our counselors is an expert in that arena, and he's going to talk about some resources through the Venture Madness. I guess it's a competition that's coming up. So those are just in the next few weeks. To see more of the events, you can go to our event page. So questions, did anything come through in terms of questions, Donna?
No, I don't see any more questions. So I think we're good.
Well, hopefully that means we hit the mark in some way. But give us some feedback if there's things that that we need to improve on, and fill out that survey at the end here. And I feel like I'm a winner because I got us out 3 minutes early, and it's always good when the teacher lets you out early. So have a great rest of your day then.